Tell us about the first filk you wrote.
Well, actually, I think that the first serious filk I wrote was Hope Eyrie. This is before we even got to Chicago. We were hanging together because we'd just been kicked out of the last apartment building for lack of rent, and we were scrambling for money, jobs and no work. And we heard of this house on the edge of town. A bunch of students had taken over. The whole gang paid the rent, and the landlord didn't care what they did. So it was a safe place to stay. And they had one TV in the whole house, a little black and white. And anyway, I was staying out there, and my mom came to visit. And to try to tell me to come home, and marry the lawyer of my choice. And I kept insisting, nope. I may be poor out here, but I'm free, and I'm going to keep singing, and I'm going to be a folk singer. I'm going to live my own life. Thank you. I do not want to marry for money. Mom kept nagging me. Oh, she brought the usual presents of clothes, trying to lure me back, and trying to dress me up properly. I was running around in blue jeans and a T-shirt, as I usually do. I mean, that's been my general uniform for the last 50 years. But as I say, she shook me out to dinner and nagged me. I insisted, no, take me back to the house. And she took me back to the house, still nagging. She had a couple boxes of clothes for me to come bring in. If you dress decently, your chances are better at what? And I took the first box in, and I realized there was silence in the house. But there was a light in the living room. I walked in, and there's everybody in the house, dead silent, raptly watching a TV screen. And I watched and I realized, oh my God, it's the NASA feed. We're watching the moon landing. And I heard those words, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. And then the newscaster's voiceover. I saw it right there. And I forgot my argument with Mom. I just dropped the box, ran back out and said, Mom, guess what's happening right this minute? They've landed on the moon. There's a man walking on the moon. We're on the moon right now. And her reply was, I'm sure I care when my little girl is ruining her life. That was it. I said, thank you, Mom. I'm going back in the house now. I took the second box and walked back in and watched the rest of the broadcast. Well, at that point, I kind of lost all sympathy for Mama. Sorry. I remained polite to her for the rest of her life, but I avoided her as much as possible.
What led to Hope Eyrie?
Yeah, I started writing the chorus that night. It took me 6 years to finish that song. It was so much I wanted to say that I had to compact into a few lines. Yeah, I guess that was my first true folk song. And it's still my theme song. That was my first, and I still think my best folk song. If I can be remembered for only one song, let it be that one. Just like Joe Hill is remembered for The Preacher and the Slave, and Woody Guthrie for This Land Is Your Land.
Bouncing back forward to Cherryh, can you share anything you remember about the making of the Carmen Miranda's Ghost tape?
Oh, yeah, okay. The way it began is we were just having a celebration party for printing another album. And the party was crowded. There's plenty of food and drink. I'm sitting there with my guitar plunking away. And I think it was Dominic Bridwell was one of our singers. We asked him to bring the fruit bowl from the dining room out here so we can all eat something. We're getting hungry. So he goes out the dining room and picks up the fruit bowl. And it was so crowded that he had to put it on his head. And then wiggle his way through the crowd holding the fruit bowl on his head. I looked at him and said, my God, it's Carmen Miranda. And somebody else said, Carmen Miranda's Ghost, right. Da 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 da. Bam. Carmen Miranda's Ghost is haunting Space Station 3. And it took off from there. It was a fairly easy song to write. And it became very popular around the gang. And Terry just said, yeah, we'll put it on the next tape. And she did. And Dominic Bridwell got to sing some of the song, some of the harmony on it. Only fair since he'd inspired the song.
So then, could you share any thoughts about your main songs on that particular tape?
Well, I remember I just finished off another popular military sci-fi story. A couple of them, in fact. I believe it was the first, the Honor Harrington series. And I was getting a little bit jaded with the idea of the Space Marines. You know, oh wow, gosh, Space Marines. Especially knowing what I'd heard from real Marines coming back from the war and their attitude toward it. You know, when I was in Chicago, I was working with Vietnam Veterans Against the War, and I got to see an awful lot of guys who were veterans came back. missing pieces. The VVAW convention was held in our union hall because it was the only place big enough to host them that would have them. And I got to be one of the people who ran the convention, pretty much. Well, I was a gopher, actually, at the VVAW convention. And I also volunteered to be the first night guard, because, the Chicago Red Squad was going to try to come and breast things up, and we had to keep watch for them, so. Anyway, I went out to dinner and came back to do my watch. And the guys had sacked out in various places on the tables on the floor around the top of the convention hall because it was safer than going anywhere else. And they'd all brought their sleeping bags. Hey, these are veterans. And I started walking my rounds around the... They put the tables together toward the center of the room. Everybody else who couldn't fit on a table was out toward the outside, so there was an aisle between them. And I started walking my first round the night, and I tripped over what I thought were a pair of boots. And they weren't boots. They were a pair of wooden legs from the knee on down. And I realized what I'd stepped on and how quickly set them upright. I looked up, and there's this young guy asleep on a table. He was the guy that they had belonged to. His pants leg were rolled up, and I saw that his legs ended just below the knee skin, as soft and dimpled as a baby's cheeks. And my eyes had adjusted to the gloom by then. I began looking around. I saw more. How many guys were short in their sleeping bags? There was one fellow pillowing his head on an arm that was not attached to his shoulder. And this one guy asleep in his wheelchair because he couldn't get out of it, or not without help. Look at all this wreckage and thought to myself, okay, this is what war does. That kind of inspired me to write a few more anti-war songs.
So then, Space Hero is an anti-war song.
Yep. So I'd gotten kind of jaded with reading mill sci-fi, mil-spec sci-fi that leaves out little things like the wreckage left. And that's when I wrote Hero. Do you wanna be a hero in the sky? Chonk, chonk. Do you wanna be a hero in the sky? High adventure, higher pay, join the Space Marines today, and you're gonna be a hero in the sky. The recruiter's pitch with the realistic comebacks.
Do you have any thoughts you would share on any of the other songs you co-wrote or sung on Carmen Miranda's Ghost?
Okay, the ones I did with Misty Lackey, for a long time, she would write the poems and I'd put the tunes. Practically every week would get a bunch of... Oh, here's a bunch of new poems by Misty Lackey. Can you put tunes to them? Give me an hour.
Well, do you have any thoughts on Some Kind of Hero?
Yep. And one thing, it's one hell of a ballad. Misty is very good at those. The hard part was getting a tune to it that was sufficiently both brave and pathetic. I mean, look what happens to everybody else except him.
What about Guardians?
That was actually easier, because I just needed a grim tune for this guy dragging himself through the miseries of saving his life when he's physically messed up and being encouraged by the ghosts. Yeah. I mean, it's like the rhythm of somebody dragging himself across a deck. La 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 la.
I noticed you tended to, in your younger years, try to aim for the music to actually have that kind of emote, but now you've got a rhythm that's your rhythm, and when you sing or do, you just tend to go to the Leslie rhythm.
Well, over the years I've fallen into this particular picking styles and riffs. You can hear, you heard when I was doing all that recording, there was an awful lot of guitar riffs I used over and over. I don't remember what the original introduction to a lot of those songs were, so I just used one of my riffs. So it's all right. It's lazy, but I've been playing these riffs and particular chord patterns for years, and I could do in my sleep. The music always has to fit the emotion of the words. Different tones and harmonies and pitches do have emotional meaning, fine shades of emotions. Instrumental music is the language of pure emotion. The fun part is trying to figure out exactly how to express a complicated feeling in music. It can be done, yes. You heard a lot of the songs I did that hadn't been recorded. Even though I was just doing them to get them recorded, I think you could tell from the tunes how the tunes and the rhythm and the harmonies, or the chords, how I was trying to get different feelings.
I remember we had discussed Eternal Loser once, and I mentioned the E minor.
Because in that particular key, the way you play the bass strings is different from the way you would play an A minor. It gives a different effect. Remember, I compose on guitar. The arrangement of the strings in each chord dictates a lot of what I'm going to be doing with the performance.
How about Good Ship Manatee?
Okay, that was Deb Sanders, right? Da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. I mean, yeah, it's a fun shanty, so I give it kind of a rocking and rolling rhythm. Da-dum, 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 la 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 la. All hail the Manatee, heads up, she's passing by. You know, she is the oddest ship that ever tried to fly. Mm-hmm.
How about Sam Jones?
That's a Cherryh. Yeah, Cherryh's writing is different. She's got a kind of a sparse, grim, and dry style. But with her poems, her poetry, you have to have a more precise kind of tune. Da da dum 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 da da dum 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 da da dum 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 dum. Da dum 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 da da dum 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 dum. And as I say, it starts off with a mundane setting, and it works up. So you have to start off with that kind of almost cautious tune, and then as you add more chords, more meaning, and the verses carry more meaning, it gets heavier. Have you noticed the way I play it? It starts off with careful fingering. Ding 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 ding. Bum 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 bum. I'm doing mostly bass runs there, and a few strums. And then I add more fingering as the story gets deeper. And it finally winds up with that grand mess of crashing chords. For space is wide and good friends are too few. Too few. So, as the story gets more complex, I'm adding more complex fingering. It's like it's not a filk or a folk, it's a regular, it was an abolitionist hymn. Once to every man and nation. Okay, that's not my song, but I wanted to put it in there because it's so applicable. And the way I had them record it was, think about, okay, you're in a Quaker meeting house, and one little Quaker lady stands up and starts singing. Once to every man and nation comes the moment to decide. And then one man gets up and sings along with her. The way a Quaker meeting goes, I don't know if you've ever been to one. Everybody comes in, I think the officiator, it's not even called a priest, rings the bell to let everybody know, okay, it's starting. Everybody sits and meditates. And then somebody who feels inspired stands up and talks about what they're inspired about. And people stand up and answer. So I had this song, like, okay, imagine you're in a Quaker meeting house, it's quiet, and this one little Quaker lady stands up and sings the first couple. Once to every man and nation comes the moment to decide in the fight of truth with falsehood for the good or evil side. And since this was written during the years leading up to the Civil War, and the Quakers were obviously anti-slavery, very, it's obvious people would know what she was talking about. It would make sense that one man would stand up and sing along with her in the next two lines. Then in the next verse, a few more men would stand up, and people are standing up and singing with her. Until finally, by the end of the song, you have a whole choir, which is the whole meeting house standing up and singing with her. And that's the impression I wanted to give seeing it that way.
So Sam Jones is a Quaker meeting.
Mm-hmm. So Sam Jones is structured sort of the same way. It's not exactly a Quaker meeting about abolition, but telling a story about loyalty, labor, and death in the star lanes, and everybody understands that. Same thing.